Good afternoon. It's September 26th, 2020, and this is episode 26 of Rob Explains, your daily podcast discussing and explaining cool, random, and interesting things. I'm Rob. Thanks for joining me. For today's episode, I thought we'd step a little further back in time and actually talk about some myth and legend that surrounds America before it was America. Now, if I was to ask you, why did Columbus leave Spain and head towards the New World, you'd probably have an answer that goes something along the lines of, he was looking for a trade route to India, and he was the only one who believed that the earth was round. Well, that's partially true, but not exactly true. Columbus fancied himself an amateur mathematician, and he had done his own calculations on the size of the earth. Now, he believed that the earth was a globe, as did most of the educated people in Spain, and Italy, and France, and the UK, and everywhere that descended from traditional Western civilization. You see, actually, back in 300 BC, everyone had basically settled on the fact that the Earth was round. It was a sphere, not flat. And this was done by taking measurements in Athens and then further away in Egypt. And what they could tell is the Earth must be round based on the angle of the sun when it's at its highest point overhead. In Alexandria, it looked almost straight down a well, making the bottom of the well light up. In Athens, nowhere near. If you put a stick up, it would cast a shadow in a certain direction and a certain length in both places, but the length was different and the direction was different. So they knew, by calculating from the distance between Alexandria and Athens, they could estimate the size of the globe. And they weren't far off, only a few 100 miles. Columbus, however, thought that that math was not correct and that the globe was actually much smaller than people thought it was. This is why he thought by sailing west, he could actually get to the Indies much faster than those who went around Africa. Little did he know, he would instead stumble on a brand new continent or two and have a new place to explore. But let's talk about that exploration. We often credit Columbus with discovering the New World, but he didn't really discover it, did he? I mean, discounting the fact that there were already human beings here when he got here, and they had crossed the Bering Land Bridge about 10,000 years before he arrived, and had been thriving on the continent since then, and they had spread from the continent proper to all of the islands of the Caribbean. But ignoring that fact, there is also two cultures that we've known about since then that have come to North America. The first, a few hundred years before Columbus, was Leif Erikson and the Vikings. Now, we credit Leif Erikson as a Viking, but the truth of the matter is Leif Erikson had actually been converted to Christianity by the King of Norway and was heading out to the realms of the Vikings to try and convert the non-believers. He was headed to Greenland, but was blown off course and landed in a new place where there were no Vikings and Vikings hadn't been before, and he named the place Vinland. And most likely that was in Nova Scotia, in Canada, in North America. He stayed there for a few seasons and then returned, later was crowned the king of his people. But you can find those settlements today in Nova Scotia, ones that have been dated all the way back to the time of Leif Erikson. Now, if we were to go back even further, what we would find is that there are distinct stone tools that were first discovered in and around Clovis, New Mexico, and have been found all over the continent since then. Now, these tools would not have been brought by the human beings that came across the Bering Land Bridge, but had come some point after that. Likely, they came on boats from somewhere in the Pacific Ocean to the western side of North or South America, and then that culture, the Clovis culture, as we call it, spread all throughout the New World. And because they had stone tools that were superior to anything humans had in the New World at the time, it's very likely that they dominated and created somewhat of a society, even before other societies had sprung up. There is also a chance that during global glaciation, that Pacific Islanders found at some point the edge of the glaciers that had come down from the North Pole and just sailed along the edge of it. It's well known that at the edge of these glaciers where runoff occurs, there's a lot of fish, which means a food source. And if they kept sailing along the edge of these global glaciers, they would actually make their way from Asia to North America and have a nice source of food along the way. And eventually, land that had given way to ice would once again give way to land, and they could start and settle a society. So one last fact about Christopher Columbus. First of all, we call him Christopher Columbus, and we think of him as an explorer from Spain, but you may or may not know he was actually Italian, and his name was Cristobal Colombo, and it had been Spanglicized in history and then Anglicized for us here in America. But let me ask you one last important fact. What were the names of his 3 ships? If you've heard the rhyme, anytime between, being a child and now, you would have likely said the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And you would be wrong. At least partially wrong. The name of his main ship, which you probably know as the Santa Maria or the Saint Mary, wasn't actually Santa Maria. It was Santa Gallega. And gallega is just a word that means ship, so it was the saint ship. However, sailors, being the type of folks that they are, had renamed the ship in an honorific sort of way to the Santa Maria Galanta. Now, Maria Galanta was actually the name of a famous prostitute in the port city where they left. So they renamed the ship after her. Yes, it was Santa Gallega, which is the ship, the holy ship, but they renamed it the Santa Maria after her. What about his second ship? La Nina. Well, the name of La Nina was actually La Santa Clara, or Saint Clara. But, again, being as they were, the sailors gave it the nickname Niña, which just means little girl in Spanish. It was the smallest of all 3 ships, and being the smallest, became the little girl. Finally, what about the Pinta? Now, Pinta actually just means the painted, and in this context, it would mean the painted one. It's likely that this ship, being one of the newer ships that Columbus had, actually had a brand new coating of paint, and everything might have looked new and shiny and fancy on it. So they named it Pinta, meaning the painted one, but again, sailors with their slang, it's actually a slang word for a prostitute in Spanish in Spain. The true name of the ship? Well, that's been lost to history. So instead of La Santa Clara, whatever the name of the Pinta was, and La Santa Gallega, we get the Niña, the little one, the Pinta, the painted one, and the Santa Maria, or the Santa Maria Gallante, the Holy Maria, who was a prostitute. Why do you know the names of these ships incorrectly? Well, in the 600-some years since the ship sailed, it's likely that religious authorities have had some influence on those. And they simplified and shortened, and the names lost their meaning when telling the story, so that we didn't know that they were based on sailors' vernacular. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Rob Explains. Look for new episodes daily wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. Do you have a subject you'd like me to cover, or just looking for more Rob Explains? Find us online on all social media at Rob Explains. Got a comment, question, or query? Or did I get something wrong and you want to correct me? Shoot me an email, rob@robexplains.com, or you can leave a comment down below. I'll check those right after the show goes live. And you can send me a message, anchor.fm/RobExplains/message. And in the form of a voicemail, I can actually include it in a future episode. Once again, thank you for joining me. Until next time, this is Rob. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great day.